Fellas, it is Christmas morning. Welcome to NFL Draft Day. To celebrate this, we have to do one final first round 2024 NFL mock draft to try and gauge what's going to happen on Thursday night tonight. As you guys are watching this, we will be live, 8-9 hours from now at about 7:30 Eastern time. So we are going to do one more mock draft, and we are not going to waste any time. We are going to give our full first round projections here. Start the draft. I'm on the clock picking from the odds. Danny will be picking from the evens here. Obviously, we know it's going to be Caleb Williams at 1 overall. They pretty much have his jersey printed out already at this point in time and handed to him. So, Danny, I'll leave it to you at number 2 overall, which also feels pretty chalky at this point, but a little bit up in the air in terms of decision points.
Yeah, this one's really interesting. So the chalk is, like you alluded to, Jaden Daniels has minus 400 odds of being selected second overall by the Washington Commanders if you check the majority of sports books right now. So that is the expected Vegas lean. Again, this is a what we think would happen draft, not a what we would do, because if this is a what would we do, we would be taking Drake Maye at the second overall pick. But for the purpose of the predictive mock, I will be going with the odds-on favorite for this pick with Jaden Daniels of the LSU Tigers.
Yep. Jane Daniels, like you said, favorite to be the the quarterback of the Washington Commanders. I am up on the clock here with the New England Patriots. Also, starting to close the odds a little bit in terms of Drake Maye being a minus 290 according to DraftKings Sportsbook right now. I still think there's a possibility that that Drake Maye, I mean, he's a favorite for the number 3 overall pick. Let me be clear, not necessarily to be the New England Patriots quarterback. So I think whether it's the Minnesota Vikings coming up for Drake Maye or the Patriots themselves sitting and picking Drake Maye here, it's probably going to be Drake Maye. And to be honest with you, I don't think that the Vikings would not be in possession of the 3rd overall pick currently if it meant that they were going to get it eventually. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think if the Vikings were indeed going up and getting aggressive for Drake Maye, they'd already be in possession of the 3rd overall pick right now. So for me, I do believe that the Patriots are going to stick and pick the quarterback from UNC, Drake Maye. Obviously, we know with these 3 quarterbacks, they all bring something different to the table. Caleb's your out of structure, do it all kind of passer. Jaden Daniels, more of your run first RPO style quarterback. And then you have Drake Maye, who can operate a pro style offense and air raid offense too. But I do think he is the mobility and the arm talent to be able to carry this Patriots franchise. If you're the Patriots, probably don't want him on the field right away. Let Jacoby Brissett take his hits, throw to the bad receivers, and figure it out next offseason with Drake Maye and build around him at that point. Maybe get him 5-7 starts towards the end of the season. But I feel pretty good if I was the Patriots that I'm getting a franchise quarterback. I'm not expecting to be picking this high every year.
What it comes down for me, and I agree with you, when you're the New England Patriots and you're picking 3rd overall, if you have the opportunity to select an alien type of quarterback, and when I say alien type of quarterbacks, I get questions sometimes like, what exactly do you mean by that? When I refer to a quarterback as an alien, I'm talking about the height, the weight, the arm talent, the mobility. All of those traits are at an elite to a very, very high level. And with Drake Maye, that bleeds off the screen. You have to go and compete with Patrick Mahomes. You have to go and compete with Justin Herbert, with Josh Allen, with Joe Burrow, with Lamar Jackson, with Trevor Lawrence, these top quarterbacks in the AFC. You need your own superhuman. You need your own alien to be able to compete with them. And to me, I agree. Drake Maye gives you that fighting chance to be able to win a shootout against those guys. So if I'm New England, I think that's the proper pick. This is really where the draft starts, in my opinion, because I do think the draft will end up being Caleb Williams 1, Jaden Daniels 2, Drake Maye at 3. It really comes down to if the Vikings believe the Giants are all in on JJ McCarthy. And there's a lot of smoke right now. Like, are the Giants really in? Are they using that smoke to potentially get a quarterback needy team to jump them so they can get a receiver of their liking? That is the big topic of discussion. That is the big talking point at this current point. If I'm Minnesota, I don't know if I'm buying the Giants' pure interest in JJ McCarthy at this point. I mean, we're going to find out at 6th overall exactly what happens here because I'm sticking and picking with the Cardinals. I don't think they're able to make a deal done. I think the pick ends up being Marvin Harrison Jr. of the Ohio State Buckeyes. And he's just a ready-made number 1 wide receiver, which is exactly what they need for this roster on a potential playoff team come 2024. They have their quarterback back, obviously Kyler Murray. You add a number 1 weapon to that offense. It really bolsters the ceiling, makes them a fringe top 10 level unit if they can hit that upper tier percentile.
Yeah, I think if the trade were to have happened with the JJ McCarthy smoke, and we've heard Brugler and Daniel Jeremiah and some of these other major guys that are connected to the league say that they don't think that the JJ McCarthy to the Giants thing is real. They think it's a smokescreen. They think, and I get it, because the Giants, while it does kind of make sense that they would be interested in a JJ McCarthy, develop him, but at the same time, you don't have any receiving talent. Daniel Jones is guaranteed to be your starter just from a financial standpoint this year. So for me, it's like, why not try and give Daniel Jones a fair shake with a real number one wide receiver? Worst case scenario, you're drafting a quarterback next year. And as much as JJ McCarthy maybe would have been the quarterback one in next year's class also, it's not like it's going to be a stark difference. Like, it's not like you're passing on a Drake Maye here for a wide receiver, because, you know, when you're as high enough as the Giants would be to pick a Drake Maye, then I understand, just pick the quarterback, figure out the rest later, like the Patriots are in that situation right now. But to me, I look at this 4, 5, and 6 hole as these receivers are going to go off the board because they're simply just that talented of players. And with the Los Angeles Chargers here at number 5 overall, again, this is a spot where they could trade down, come up, and have Minnesota come and get JJ McCarthy. Of course, Jim Harbaugh coached him at Michigan, so he's going to have a lot of good things to say about him. But I believe the Chargers' biggest need is wide receiver. This class is ripe with 3 elite ones, and they can come in right away and help out Justin Herbert. The question is, which wide receiver are they going to pick? As of right now, Malik Nabers is currently the favorite among the wide receivers outside of Marvin Harrison, who for some reason is ahead of him in the odds. Plus 350 on Malik Nabers right now, plus 1,700 on Rome Odunze. I actually really like the idea of betting Odunze just for the value, because I do think from a stylistic play style comparison, he does kind of match what Jim Harbaugh would like in a wide receiver. But I am going to go with the chalk here. I'm going to go with Malik Nabers. Jetpack Brandon Ayuk is what he's been comped to. I believe that is a perfect comparison for him. Get him in open space. He's still really young, still just 20 years old, and he was extremely productive this year. Probably should have won the Bolitnikoff Award. Comes from a big program, torched SEC defenses. He is a slam dunk number 5 pick to the Los Angeles Chargers, who desperately need some juice on their offense.
Yeah, and I agree. Personally, for me, that would also be my pick. I am curious. A lot of smoke right now. Obviously, you know, JJ tied to Michigan there. Jim Harbaugh coming from Michigan. Maybe he wants to pick the landing spot for his quarterback. On the flip side, too, there's been rumors of him potentially taking a tackle. I agree with you, though. I just think Malik Nabers is too good of a talent to pass on at that 5th overall pick, especially with an offense that lost Mike Williams, that traded away Keenan Allen, that current receiving core is Josh Palmer, who came off of injury last year, Quentin Johnson, who had one of the worst rookie seasons we've seen from a first-round talent in recent memory. You need juice added to this receiving core. It knocks Quentin Johnson's responsibilities down. It knocks Josh Palmer's responsibilities down because you're drafting Malik Nabers to be the number 1 in your offense for the foreseeable future, tied to Justin Herbert. So I think this is the logical pick, and if they do stick and pick at 5, this would be the direction I would go as well. Number 6 here, New York Giants also need a receiver. Their current odds in terms of number 6 overall pick. Number 1, Malik Nabers. He's off the board right now. The number 2 player, according to this, in terms of number 6 overall odds, is Rome Odunze, plus 250. And I just think it makes way too much sense. They need a number 1 X wide receiver. Darren Waller potentially retiring, taking a weapon away from the offense. Saquon Barkley obviously leaving for the Philadelphia Eagles. You need an offensive playmaker if you want to develop this offense. You can't expect Brian Dable to be able to take, you know, completely miscast pieces like Darius Slayton, like Wan'Dale Robinson, like Daniel Jones coming off an ACL without a true glue to this offense. And I really do feel like Rome Odunze has the upside to be a top 5 to 8 receiver in the NFL and be the glue to this offense that they need.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, again, you can't give a fair valuation on Daniel Jones without having some semblance of wide receiver talent. You knock everybody's roll down 1 peg. Jalen Hyatt can just be a field stretcher. Wan'Dale Robinson can just be a slot receiver, while Rome Odunze operates as your number 1. I think Odunze is the perfect fit for that market too, because it sounds by all means that he's a hard worker and he's a good leader and that kind of stuff. And I think that may scare them away from Malik Nabers a little bit, because there has been some kind of like attitude concerns. Of course, they know how that was with an LSU wide receiver in years past. So I think Rome Odunze to the Giants just is one of the hand in glove fits that I just really love for this NFL draft. Maybe they'll get aggressive and try and go up for Harrison potentially. Like, I could see the Giants maybe doing that. But to me, the whole JJ McCarthy smoke is just so that Harrison could slide to them. Honestly, I think that's the whole reason that they want someone to come up for JJ McCarthy, is that they could maybe slide up to a pick with the Chargers and pick Marvin Harrison. I think that's who they want, and that's why they were starting those rumors. To me, the Titans pick is pretty cut and dry here. I know we're going chalk at this point in time, but I do believe this is how the draft is going to go. I think everybody's really excited. We want to see fireworks. We want to see a huge trade up from the Vikings. We want to see all this stuff. But to me, these quarterbacks and these wide receivers are too good of prospects that these teams are just going to be, oh, we don't need these players, especially considering these first 3 teams desperately need a quarterback. These next 3 teams desperately need a wide receiver. This next team desperately needs a left tackle. So we're going to take Joe Alt here to the Tennessee Titans. Again, very chalky. I do believe this is what's going to happen. If you could bet on the first 7 picks of the NFL draft, this is what I would bet personally.
Yeah, no, I think this was going to be the chalk top 7. I actually think Josh Norris tweeted it out with this exact order being the chalk, but I understand that this is the chalk, and I understand that betting on the chalk sometimes will leave your mouth a little bit dry, but I just can't envision the draft uncovering any other way, to be honest. Like, I just feel like given the players at hand here, given, in my opinion, as much as I like JJ McCarthy, his difference between Drake Maye, I don't see a team like the Minnesota Vikings, like the Denver Broncos, or being able to get him over those teams sticking and picking those priority players like Joe Alt, franchise-changing left tackle, and those top 3 wide receivers who pretty much have, in my opinion, top 12 level wide receiver type of projections at the minimum, and potentially have top 3 to 5, top 3 to 8 upside amongst the NFL. I just can't see teams trading off of that. However, this is the pick that a team would be willing to trade off of. Number 8 overall, this is very up in the air. People may point to they stick and pick Quinyon Mitchell. People may point to they stick and pick a guy like Latu, Dallas Turner. I think this is the trade spot. I think this is where Minnesota says, you know what? We can't let Denver, we can't let the Raiders, we can't let one of these teams behind us potentially get JJ McCarthy for cheap. We want to make sure that we put ourselves in position to get our franchise signal caller. So I think it probably ends up materializing maybe into something like 11 plus 108 for 43. Like I can see a world where they can keep 23 here, to be honest, because 3 pick swap up, you give up a 3rd round pick. That seems pretty fair to me. And I do feel like that this would be able to go through. So 11 plus 108 for the 8th overall pick. Comment down below if you think that's enough. Do you think that's too much? If you're a Vikings fan, if you'd want to make this move. But ultimately in this mock predictive, I think this will happen. So let's push that trade through and take JJ McCarthy.
Yeah, if it were up to me, I think they would have to give up a little bit more than this, especially knowing that they're not making this trade in the first place. If Denver and the Raiders are not calling right now. So for me, I don't necessarily think they would have to give up 23 or their first next year. What I think they might have to do is like 108, their 3rd next year, and like 167, like just a boatload of picks that are not as valuable, say, as giving up 23. I could see them having to do, because again, from the Atlanta Falcons perspective, if they're making this trade, it means that the Raiders or the Broncos or one of these other teams is trying to come up for McCarthy. And again, from the Vikings perspective, you have to be giving up enough. Otherwise, why even make the trade in the first place? So you just sit at 11 and McCarthy will slide to you.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think that's a fair package. The other way you can go is maybe 23 goes back, 43 goes back, but we'll keep it as simple as that. They make this deal and they go get their franchise signal caller with JJ McCarthy.
Yeah, so it ends up materializing as a 1, 2, 3s and what, a 5th rounder, a 6th rounder there. So again, maybe that's too much if you're a Vikings fan, but that's, again, you're paying a quarterback tax there. You're paying the fact that the Broncos and the Raiders might be very interested in moving up for McCarthy. So that's going to be, I'm assuming, the pick here for the number 8 overall Minnesota Vikings selected there. McCarthy goes 8 overall. He's a top 10 quarterback. We are all happy from a dynasty perspective because he pushes other prospects down the board and whatnot. This next pick with Chicago is an interesting one for me because I do think there's a number of like off the wall defensive players that they could go after. Like a Byron Murphy from Texas. I wouldn't be shocked if he went this high. He's currently actually the betting favorite at plus 125 to go 9th overall. And I remember there was a late resurgence for the Bears pick last year of Darnell Wright being the odds-on favorite right before they actually made that pick there. And I thought it was a little bit shocking because for a while last year, we were expecting it to be different players. Everybody wants Odunze if you're a Bears fan. I just don't think he's going to be here. I think that Jared Verse, Dallas Turner, these other corners potentially, they don't really fit. I think their decision point will be between Byron Murphy and an offensive tackle. It could be Olu Fashanu, which I'm sure you're going to talk about, was the left tackle for Caleb Williams in college. If I was the Chicago Bears, I would probably invest in the offensive line as well because your defense played better last year. If Caleb can carry your offense, that's all that's how everybody gets extensions, right? You give the offense the best stuff that they can get. And to me, that would involve drafting Olu Fashanu or Troy Fautanu or something like that. But what I think they're going to do is take Byron Murphy. So Byron Murphy is going to be the pick here at number 9 overall. You get an explosive 3 technique. My team, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, drafted one last year in Kalijah Cansey, and that looks like a pretty solid pick so far. And I see a lot of similarities as a Texas fan with Byron Murphy and Kalijah Cansey because I see both of those guys quite a bit. And I do see Murphy being a good fit on that defense too because Eberflus had a lot of success with Indianapolis defensive tackles like Grover Stewart and DeForest Buckner and those guys.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a ton of sense. It'd be curious though. You get Caleb Williams, you may want to get an offensive player, but if they view Byron Murphy as being that game-changing 3-tech, you're going to take him at 9th overall. So I think that's a really good pick. And like you said, 9th overall, he's currently the betting favorite at plus 125. So DraftKings does expect him to be selected at that pick. And speaking of favorites, at the number 10 overall pick, Brock Bowers plus 180. I think he makes a ton of sense. I think he's arguably a top 5 overall player in this class, regardless of position. They need a tight end. They need a second weapon in this offense. And to be honest, so Brock Bowers is going to be my pick. But the one that I think is off the radar right now, it's plus 2,500 that I saw Dane Brugler also brought up, but I brought up to our group chat earlier today that makes a ton of sense from both a schematic and a weapons fit. You have Garrett Wilson as your one. You need another weapon in this offense. So let's just say you do not want to take a tight end in the first round. Brian Thomas Jr. is 6'3", 205 plus pounds, 4.3 speed. He is the perfect complement to Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson's your technician. Garrett Wilson's your 150 plus target type of receiver. You get Brian Thomas as your big play guy in an Aaron Rodgers offense. At plus 2,500, man, I may have to lay some steam on that, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, you signed Mike Williams, which kind of would make that draft pick a little redundant. But I guess in the long term, Mike Williams is only there for 1 year. Maybe you could bring Brian Thomas along a little slower. So I agree. I think that makes a lot of sense. Another sneaky bet, if anybody's curious about this, that I would throw out there is the number 9 pick being Brock Bowers at plus 1,400, because a team like Indianapolis might want to hop New York for Brock Bowers. And that's why I could see, like, I don't think the Bears are going to take Brock Bowers, but again, you're betting the number 9 overall pick being Brock Bowers. So it might be a team like New Orleans, a team like Las Vegas, probably not Las Vegas, a team like Indianapolis, a team like Seattle potentially coming up and getting ahead of the Jets because they know that he's been connected to Brock Bowers. They've been connected to Brock Bowers. So that one's an interesting one for me as well. But I think ultimately it'll be Brock Bowers to the Jets as well.
Yeah. You're back on the clock here. Technically, this was Minnesota's pick. Now it's the Falcons' pick, 11 overall. Were you leaning with the Falcons? Because obviously they do trade down, get some extra capital here, and maybe still get the guy that they would have taken at that 8th overall pick.
Yeah, I think the decision point at 8 was probably between the top 3 defensive players for them, which probably were laiatu, or Dallas Turner, depending on which edge rusher they prefer, and Quinyon Mitchell, and maybe even Byron Murphy as well. But they already they have, some interior guys there. So probably between the edge and the corners. I think these corners are going to go, man. I think these guys are going to go high. And I don't think the edge rushers are going to go as high as people think, just because they're like, there's a flat tier of latu, Dallas Turner, and Jared Verse. And I think there's more of a hastiness of getting one of these top corners, in my opinion. So I'm going to give them Quinyon Mitchell, but I could very easily see them go with Dallas Turner or go with latu. Of course, there is connections to that coaching staff in latu. So any one of those players would probably make sense for the Falcons, but I like the idea of building your defense back to front because you already have AJ Terrell and Jesse Bates. So you can really make that back end a strong suit, especially in the NFC South, where you got to guard Mike Evans, you got to guard Chris Olave. Carolina hopefully can figure out their passing game, but it's a bombs away division, and I could see Quinyon Mitchell and AJ Terrell being one of the best cornerback tandems in the league.
Yeah, absolutely. AJ Terrell is obviously a freak athlete in his own right, but obviously more of a technician at this point of his career. One of the better cornerbacks in the league. Quinyon Mitchell, all the traits in the world. Really good film. The only problem, of course, Toledo, not the biggest of competition. So that's the question mark. But regardless, if Quinyon Mitchell works out at the next level, you're talking about top 5 level upside based on traits alone. So you get that to combat those wide receivers in that division. I think it makes a ton of sense. Now we're on a trade spot. Number 12 overall, the Denver Broncos do not have a second-round pick. The Denver Broncos also need a quarterback in the worst way. I get it if you're a Zach Wilson fan like we were a couple years ago. They did make that move. He's not going to be their starter coming into the year. I really do feel like this is the trade-down spot, maybe for a tackle. Maybe a team wants to work up. Honestly, I think it's just going to be for a tackle, whether that's Taliese.
I do too. I think we've heard a lot of smoke about that as well, and this is going to be a tackle run. So the Bengals, the Rams, the Steelers, some of these teams getting ahead of the Raiders and the Saints and the Colts, who are, notorious tackle spots, and even the Seahawks and the Jags too are at risk of taking like a fautanu and moving them inside even. So yeah, I think that the Bengals would be ringing the phone of the Denver Broncos right now.
Yeah, we will we'll make that trade happen. So if we go to the Bengals, it's probably 18 plus 49, I would say, give or take for 12. Maybe you
Yeah,
throw back
maybe
a
they
later
give up
pick.
like a third back the other way in 2025 or something.
Maybe 121 because I think they
Yeah,
would want to kill the
121. Yeah,
future
that makes
picks.
some sense. Again, you're trading up for a high leverage position, a
Yeah.
position that matters a lot. So yeah, and Denver, like you said, is going to be motivated to recoup a second round pick, especially if they want, either to take their quarterback at 18 and just have more depth to build around him, or to bypass quarterback at 18 and potentially be in on a Michael Penix or a Bo Nix with that 49th overall pick. I think that makes sense for Denver on so many levels. So them trying to trade down, especially, I mean, we didn't mention it, but all the top edge rushers are on the board. If somebody wanted to get corner 2, they could come up and get it. But I've heard Daniel Jeremiah and Dane Brugler and these guys say the teams are calling about these tackles, and I think the Bengals are probably one of those teams.
Yep. So we will project that trade. And out of the fits, I honestly think the two that make the most sense would be either Olu Fashanu, or the three, to be honest, Olu Fashanu, JC Latham, or Taliese Fuaga. I'll let you actually decide between them because I think either one of them would make a ton of sense at the spot.
Well, let me ask you this. They're filling their left tackle spot, right? Not their right tackle spot. Or is it
So I believe they have both Browns right now, right? They have Orlando and they have Trent Brown, correct?
Right, yeah, but Trent Brown plays right tackle primarily. So
Yeah.
maybe they're looking towards Orlando Brown as like the long-term solution at left tackle, and they would want a plug and play right tackle because Trent Brown isn't the most reliable guy in the world. I could see JC Latham being the option there, but I mean, Fautanu also makes sense too, or Fautanu also makes sense too, because he has played pretty much every position on the offensive line. I'll defer to you. I'll defer it right back to you. Honestly, I think any one of these guys makes sense.
I'll lean Fuaga because you can play him inside right away. So you have the Browns. You can play Fuaga at left guard in year 1 and then kick him out to right tackle once Trent Brown is gone after the year potentially. So I think that makes the most sense.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason why they had to trade up for a tackle is because these tackles are going to keep going. So I'm going to give the Raiders a tackle here as well, even though you could argue that they need a quarterback. You could argue that they need potentially interior defensive line, even though they signed Christian Wilkins. You could argue that they could take Terrion Arnold or one of the top corners here, or maybe they want to take an edge rusher, even though they already have a couple guys there. So what I'm going to do for the Las Vegas Raiders here is I'm going to grab JC Latham. I think he makes a lot of sense for what they want to do on their offensive line. So I'll grab JC Latham at 13th overall, and you are on the board with 14. And I'm assuming you're probably taking an offensive tackle also.
Yeah, the Saints need a tackle in the worst way. For reference with the Raiders, their current favorite for position is quarterback at plus 150. However, after that, offensive lineman plus 175, cornerback plus 200. Basically, what that tells me is the Raiders are one of the bigger wild cards in the top 15. If 3 positions are basically, obviously not even odds, but plus 150 to plus 200 is very minimal change. After that, we don't know. So like if they love Michael Penix, they take him at 13. If they love Terrion Arnold, they take him at 13. Or better yet, because we're hearing the smoke of the tackle run, they love one of these tackles. JC Latham would make a ton of sense. I mean, they always end up going to Alabama when they need players in the first round, it seems.
Yeah, they've also invested heavily in their offensive line in general in the first round with Colton Miller a couple of years ago. They also took the one kid, the reach that they ended up drafting, Alex Leatherwood, I believe, was from Alabama as well too. So yeah, I can see them going JC Latham. Are you going to roll with Fashanu here, or are you going to go a different position?
So, I mean, it's going to be offensive line if I can check their depth chart right now. So I think the issue right now is Ramczyk is dealing with a lot of injury concerns. I believe it's either his back or his neck, I think, with the reports with Ryan Ramczyk. So that definitely hurts. They just had James Hurst retire, I believe, today. Their other tackle, I believe, is scheduled to be Trevor Penning on the left side. So
and who's been a bust pretty much.
I think they need a ready-made starting offensive tackle, and I think Olu Fashanu is going to be a steal at 14th overall. He should be a top 10 pick, to be honest.
Yeah, well, that's what I kept coming back to potentially with even the Bengals is like Orlando Brown has been like the staunch, I need to play left tackle in the NFL guy, but like he actually was better at right tackle in Baltimore than he's been at left tackle because he's not quite as athletic as some of the left tackles in the league. It would be nice if the Bengals could just take Fashanu and move Orlando Brown to right tackle, play Trent Brown on the inside or whatever you want to do with him, because that would make their offensive line situation better. But I think Fautanu and Fuaga make a little bit more sense for Cincinnati because they might need versatility early on in their career. So I'm on the board here with not the Cincinnati Bengals, the Indianapolis Colts. And man, these edge guys being on the board makes me really intrigued for a potential pick here with Indianapolis. I think they're the type of team that's just very much pay their own players, draft the best player available, draft according to your board, never draft according to need. And I think they would look at Dallas Turner as just a value pick at this point in time. So I'm just going to give them Dallas Turner, even though it's not a fit that we see very often. I think they would just be like, you know what, we thought Dallas Turner would be long gone, so we're just going to take Dallas Turner.
Yeah, that makes sense. And in terms of their odds right now, when it comes to the Indianapolis Colts, their current odds are cornerback, wide receiver, like defensive line and edge is still the fourth highest projected odds for them. So it's definitely still in play. Again, the market favors cornerback or wide receiver, but hypothetically, if Quinyon Mitchell's their guy and maybe they don't like the traits from a size perspective, speed perspective, and Terrion Arnold, gear them away from that. And then, of course, like maybe, who knows? Their top receivers that they would take would be the top three. And then after that, they don't value much else. Hence why there's maybe rumors of them moving up. Who knows? But regardless, I do think Dallas Turner, too talented of a player to fall past the 15th overall pick. And I mean, the Indianapolis Colts have shown in the past that when a slipping value happens, they'll be willing to pounce on it. So I like that. Next on the clock is going to be the Seattle Seahawks. There's a lot of buzz here that it could be an offensive lineman. It could be, potentially this is an off-board pick. What if they go with a Michael Penix Jr.? Obviously, there's been reports recently that teams view him and Nix as potentially sneaking into the first round. Maybe this is one of the spots. I'm not going to go that direction. The two names that I am closest on right now would be Cooper DeJean and would be Troy Fautanu. Both of them are linked to them in different regards. Troy Fautanu, obviously, Ben Grubbs coming here from Washington is a coach now on the Seattle Seahawks offensive staff. They could use his, former left tackle there at Washington with Troy Fautanu. The other connection I made, obviously, Mike McDonald coming from the Baltimore Ravens, value safety play tremendously. I can see him viewing Cooper DeJean as his next Kyle Hamilton, and I'm going to spice it up. I feel like a lot of people are going to go offensive line, but I don't think people are understanding just how much of a chess piece Cooper DeJean could be for Mike McDonald's scheme. I'm going to mix it up with Cooper DeJean because I see him fall a lot further than this in a lot of mock drafts.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense as well. It's difficult looking at this just position group, the way that it interacts in general, because one of the position groups is going to fall. It's either going to be the edge rushers, the offensive linemen, or the corners. And to be honest, I don't think it's going to be the offensive linemen. I think it's going to be either the corners or the edges or both kind of in this situation. So for me, I just look at this situation and I see Cooper DeJean maybe starting a little defensive back run here after a lot of the offensive linemen fall off the board. I'm on the board with the Jacksonville Jaguars here. I think there's two very glaring options on the board for me, either Terrion Arnold or Troy Fautanu. Do we want to go interior offensive line, or do we want to go with the more valuable position in Terrion Arnold? I believe they are going to value Terrion Arnold heavily, and I'm going to make that the pick here. So Denver sitting on the board with a couple good options. They could go offensive line. They could go edge. They might have taken a latu or a Dallas Turner at 12. So they pick up a second-round pick in the Bengals trade and might still get one of the guys they were targeting.
Yeah, absolutely. And for reference with the Jaguars, currently in terms of odds, minus 185 to take a corner. So Terrion Arnold, if he's there at 17, I think would be a very good fit for them. 18 here with Denver. The main considerations for me would be latu or Brian Thomas Jr. And I'm having a tough time here, to be honest. The way I kind of see it is with Jerry Jeudy getting traded this offseason, with Courtland Sutton potentially being involved in trade talks, you need a young number one wide receiver to pair with your next quarterback, whether that's you trading up in the second round for Michael Penix, trading up for a Bo Nix. I think your quarterback one will need that established wide receiver right away. And I just think with the traits of Brian Thomas, I can't see him slipping past the top 20. And I think this would be the surprise team that could fit for him.
Yeah, I actually placed some money down that the Broncos position that they would select would be wide receiver, whether it's in a trade down scenario or maybe even at 12, they would be willing to select Brian Thomas, or they get lucky and, one of the top receivers falls to them, or maybe they even get aggressive and go up for a top receiver. Probably not the latter because they don't have a lot of picks, but it would be, it'd be interesting if they got to trade down, recoup a second rounder and still got Brian Thomas at 18. Definitely would be an interesting fit there. The Rams, there's been some connection that they want to spend a pick on offense. Peter Schrager and Sean McVay are really close, and he's talked about how the Rams haven't had a first-round pick since like 2016 or whatever, and he said they're damn sure not taking a defensive player in the first round after they haven't spent a pick on offense in a long-ass time. So for me, there's a number of players on the board that make a lot of sense. To me, they could go wide receiver. Cooper Kupp's older. Puka Nacua was a great find, but he's really all you have at wide receiver outside on the outside there. And Matthew Stafford's getting older. Maybe he needs a little bit more help at this point in his career. It would come down to two players for me. It would come down to Troy Fautanu. Do they want to go with the offensive lineman, or do they want to throw a weapon and a Molotov cocktail into the entire draft and draft the fastest player in college football, the fastest player in Columbine history? And I'm going to give them Xavier Worthy, wide receiver of the University of Texas. Nakua and Cup, speed isn't their game. They're good players. They're great players, but speed is not their game. So I think Worthy makes a whole lot of sense. McVay has been waiting too long to spend a early round pick on an offensive skill player, and he gets one of the more exciting ones to come out in the last couple of years. So maybe a lot of you Rams fans think this is too early. You should have gone Fautanu. If you're going to go receiver, you should have taken Mitchell or whatever the case is. To me, I think he's a perfect scheme fit for what the Rams need out of their wide receiver. Just picture a way, way better version of what Tutu Atwell was able to bring to the table in spurts last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the record, this is not what was expected coming into the cycle, but silently, wide receiver up to plus 425 for the Rams first round pick. And shout out to our friend Sosa over from Underdog Fantasy, but he's been pounding the table on the fact that the Rams would trade up for a receiver. They don't end up trading up in this instance, but they do take one in the first round with Xavier Worthy. And like you said, would be the perfect complement to Puka Nacua for the long term. And especially in year one, you mentioned, he has to learn, the nuances of playing wide receiver. He has to learn to get physically tough. Well, guess what? A wide receiver 3 workload, learning from Cooper Kupp, learning from Puka Nacua in year one would be a great way to spend that time learning the ins and outs of the position.
Yeah, and Kupp is the perfect guy to show you how to do everything, the nuanced stuff, especially if you're going to take over potentially a slot receiver role at times when he moves on. He's getting older. He's been dealing with injuries. I would imagine this would be a patchwork 3 wide receiver core for year one, and then Kupp would probably be moving on after 2024. So again, a little bit of a surprise pick there, but I like the fit. I think it's super fun, and Xavier Worthy absolutely needs to get into one of these Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan type of schemes. So I couldn't pass up putting my favorite player in the draft in one of his best landing spots. So Pittsburgh Steelers, you're on the board.
Yep. So for the Steelers' current betting odds, it's minus 350 for an offensive lineman. And specifically the one that I see that makes the most sense. The Steelers released their starting center this offseason. The offensive lineman that is known as the big Swiss Army knife that can play tackle, that can play guard, that can pinch in center for me is Troy Fautanu. And Troy Fautanu has been talked about as a potential top 15 pick. Slides a little bit. I don't think he escapes out of the top 20. And I think he'd be the perfect fit as a Pittsburgh Steeler.
Yeah, absolutely. I could see them being in on any one of those top guys. I think Graham Barton makes sense for them. In this case, they kind of get lucky, and Troy Fautanu actually slides to them there. The Miami Dolphins are on the board. And speaking of Graham Barton, that's exactly the direction I'm going to go here. That. I think with the Dolphins, they sneakily have a lot of needs. I think you could grab an edge rusher given all the injuries that they've suffered at that position. But do we want to take latu with a bunch of injured edge rushers right now, who's coming off of, neck injuries that caused him to medically retire from college football? Probably not. I think the safe, up the gut pick, Graham Barton's odds to go under 22.5 in the NFL draft, to me, I think that would be considered high for most of us, who have been familiar with media mock drafts and that kind of thing. I think Graham Barton could go really as high as 16 to the Seahawks. I think he could go really, really high, potentially inside the top 15 as well. I think the NFL is higher on him than the actual media is. So Graham Barton, to me, makes a lot of sense at 21 overall to the Dolphins.
Yep, I think that makes a ton of sense. Now we are on the clock with the Philadelphia Eagles, and a couple different directions you can go. You could take a falling value on the offensive line. The only question mark I have is, do teams view Amarius Mims as being the cutoff, or do they view him as being inside the cutoff? That's the biggest determinant, because obviously, he missed some time dealing with some injuries. I don't know if they're going to view, who was the last tackle that went off the board, true tackle, because I would view Fautanu and Barton as interior guys.
Yeah, Fashanu.
Fashanu, do teams view Mims on that same tier? That's a question mark I have. I think the Eagles very well could. They could also go at the cornerback position with a guy like Nate Wiggins, inject some young speed into that core. The other position I got here, the Eagles are a smart franchise. They don't draft for need. Jared Verse and Latu are free-falling in this draft. And I simply can't look at Howie Roseman and see him passing on Latu, given the film that he's shown, because of medicals at the 22nd overall pick. Because real talk, man, this guy's in the conversation for being edge one in the class. So if you're getting that at 22nd overall when you just traded away Hassan Reddick, I think that would be a slam dunk. I just think that's way too much value to pass.
Yeah, I agree with you because you could look at their edge rushing core and you're like, well, they signed Bryce Huff. They have some of these older guys that they've gotten contributions from. Their defensive line does need a little bit of youth to it. And Derek Barnett, I believe, has been on the trade block, and some of these other guys too. Obviously, they already traded Hassan Reddick. So latu makes sense. Total Eagles pick. I think that they definitely could be the team that bites the bullet on Jackson Powers Johnson's medical history, because they've talked about, oh, he's got concussion issues and knee issues and all these like hip issues or whatever. For me, I think it could be smoke on Jackson Powers Johnson because it's only come out like as of the last week, and nobody seemed to talk about this at the combine when all the medicals were run. So to me, I doubt that he actually has that many medical issues that we're just hearing about now. And the Eagles obviously lost their franchise center and Jason Kelsey in the offseason. So they could be the team that takes JPJ more so than an offensive tackle. But they're in a position uniquely where really they could go in a number of different directions. They could go corner, they could go edge rush, they could go O-line. There's not a linebacker really or a wide receiver that I think makes a great ton of sense for them at that point in time. And they just paid Devontae Smith and they already are paying AJ Brown a lot of money. So a weird team to really get a grasp on because they don't really have a huge pressing need. I think corner is probably their biggest need, but latu free falling, like you said. I'm on the board with the Vikings here, and they obviously grabbed their franchise quarterback in JJ McCarthy with their first pick.
May I add something?
What's up?
I think if the Vikings saw Jared Verse falling this far after Danielle Hunter left in free agency, they would run to the podium.
They did also sign Jonathan Grenard to big money, though, didn't they?
Fair.
Their defense just kind of needs bodies in general. So I actually like Jerzon Newton the most out of anybody on the board here. But the tough thing for me is like Jared Verse to me strikes me as more of a guy that's a locked and loaded first round talent on most teams' boards, whereas Jerzon Newton seems to be a little bit more all over the place in terms of what people think of him. I actually, you know what? I'm going to go with Verse. I'm going to give them the falling value. These edge rushers probably shouldn't be off the on the board at this point in time. So I'll end the slide of Jared Verse there.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good pick. Cowboys on the clock here. There's two directions that they would go, possibly three if Jackson Powers Johnson is in play, but typically, unless it's Travis Frederick in 2013, the Cowboys value tackle versatility rather than interior, especially when it comes to day one. Cowboys current odds, offensive lineman is the favorite at minus 215. The other position I'd be considering would be wide receiver. Some value there at plus 600, but for me, offensive lineman here, Amarius Mims. You just lost Tyron Smith. You get potentially from a physique standpoint, from a trait standpoint, your potential next Tyron Smith. And with Amarius Mims, obviously the cons here, a little bit of inexperience, missed some time with some injury, obviously dealt with, sparing snaps playing behind Georgia offensive line of Andrew Thomas, of obviously Broderick Jones from the Steelers of last year. Didn't really get that full experience that you would expect of a player at this point. But what he does show is elite traits that I think the Cowboys would covet. And funny enough, 24th overall a couple years ago, they took an offensive lineman that was mostly based off traits rather than pure dominant film with Tyler Smith, and that's worked out very tremendously. So could you imagine a left side of your offensive line of the future of Amarius Mims and Tyler Smith? I'd be pretty damn excited.
Yeah, and I mean, if you guys are thinking, holy crap, this is a lot of offensive linemen going, the current betting odds for offensive linemen
10.5, right?
Over 9.5 is a minus 180 steam job, basically. So how many offensive linemen do we have so far? 1, 2, 3,
probably 10.
4, 5, 6, 7 so far, right? Is that how many we got?
I think more, no?
No, I think we got 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, we have 7 offensive linemen off the board still, and I'm going to take another one right here, to be honest. Yeah. So this is how I believe this draft is going to go, man. Like, I think the offensive line position will be heavily coveted. There's a lot of buzz on some of these guys that are even further down the board. I mean, we already talked a little bit about the interior guys like JPJ and stuff, but I think with the tackles, man, Jordan Morgan, Tyler Guyton, Kingsley Suamataia, Patrick Paul has been generating some buzz potentially as a first-round name. I could see the Packers being the team that pulls the trigger on Patrick Paul in the first round. That's kind of a surprise. Tyler Guyton is the one guy, similar to Graham Barton, where I think a lot of us expect him to go maybe 1-2 turn area, maybe in the early second round, but his betting market is like 26.5 and all the steam's on the under right now. So for me, I think that the Packers would be the team to take a shot on Tyler Guyton there. So interesting board for my Tampa Bay Buccaneers. There's a number of different directions I could go, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I would ask your opinion, though I know you so well for where you think they would go based on the buzz that you've heard, the insiders. The way you've described it to me is if Jackson Powers Johnson's on the board, they would run up to the podium.
Yeah, so there's a couple guys that I know the Bucks are high on, just for a fact. I know Drazon Newton is a guy that they've been connected to. I don't know why, because we drafted Kalijah Kancey in the first round last year. We have Vita Vea, who's the best nose tackle in the league, and we have guys at 5 technique, William Golston, the veteran, Logan Hall, who we took in the second round 2 years ago. To me, it just doesn't make sense. And Drazon Newton also plays the same position as Kalijah Kancey. So it doesn't make sense for me to draft Drazon Newton. I know literally anytime Jason Light opens his mouth about what he looks for in a prospect, the first word out of his mouth is toughness. Literally every single time. To me, it is JPJ or bust for him. He wants JPJ so bad. I'm almost willing to bet he started these medical rumors, to be honest. So to me, it's JPJ. That's who they would go with here. But I also have heard some of the edge rushers later down the board connected to them as well, like Chop Robinson. Darius Robinson is also heavily like he's down here at 61 in the ranks, but I think he's going to go in the first round, to be honest. If you guys want to place a bet on a player to go in the first round, I believe Darius Robinson is a good guy to go after.
Yeah, I think that's a solid bet too. For reference, with Darius Robinson right now, I'm trying to
minus 400 to go in round 1. I'm looking at the odds right now.
Minus 400.
Minus 400. Yeah, I seriously think this is the first spot that he could go, maybe even potentially earlier than this. Like if Jared Verse wasn't there for the Vikings, maybe he gets the trigger pulled at that point in time. I think he's very likely to be in play for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I actually would not be shocked if he is in fact the pick at 26, assuming these rumors about JPJ are real. So you're ultimately the guy that's going to make the call here. Do you want to go with an edge rusher, a Chop Robinson, Darius Robinson, or you want to go with JPJ?
Man, like if it's going to be an edge rusher, it would have to be Darius Robinson too. You guys running obviously a 3-4. You have Diaby, you have Joe Tryon-Shoyinka as your wide edges there. You get a guy like Darius Robinson to play your 3-4 and give you some inside rush versatility at 6'5", 296 pounds. That would make a ton of sense. It's just, man, are you guys the type of team that are like positional value or bust? But then again, you guys just took a D tackle last year, so probably not, right?
Yeah, again, the question is, do they want to take a 5 tech in the first round when they took Logan Hall 2 years ago, who they still believe in? Maybe they shouldn't, but they still believe in him. And they have William Golston, who they literally just brought back. And to me, when Jason Light does that, when he brings in and he just brings back a guy,
JPJ,
it means he's trying to not hamstring himself. The easiest way to tell what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to do in the NFL draft is see what their minor, small veteran free agency moves were. They brought in 2 offensive guards, and they brought in some D-line help with Randy Gregory, as well as bringing back Will Golston. So to me, it's going to be in the trenches. It's going to be either edge, probably outside linebacker, though, like a Chop Robinson. I don't think it'll be a down lineman, a 5 technique like Darius Robinson. Though. So for me, it'll be Chop versus JPJ if I was Jason Light at this point.
Let's give him JPJ.
Okay. So we're going to give him JPJ again. Wouldn't be shocked if it's Chop Robinson. He's been heavily connected to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They drafted a traitsy edge rusher with not a lot of production already with JTS. So to me, I think that would scare them away from Chop Robinson and towards the toughness. We need interior help on our offensive line, man. And to me, it's the biggest need on our roster. So JPJ makes a lot of sense there. I am on the board with the Arizona Cardinals, and I think this might be the Darius Robinson spot here. And I'm actually going to go with him for the Arizona Cardinals because I think they could use some beef up front. They've really been investing in the high leverage positions in recent draft classes. Wide receiver at the beginning of this one, offensive line in last year's class with Paris Johnson. So give me a down defensive lineman here.
Yeah, it gives them some size. I believe they moved Zaven Collins to a true edge. You got BJ Ojolari, who took in the second round last year, but ultimately here, you can never have too much depth on the edge. And ideally, BJ Ojolari, if you can move him into a designated pass rusher role, you have Darius Robinson as your true 4-3 base end. And then obviously on third downs, you can shift Darius Robinson inside, put BJ Ojolari on the edge, and have a formidable pass rush to complement obviously Jonathan Gannon, his culture there coming from the Eagles as their defensive coordinator. I think that make a ton of sense. The Eagles were known for having a ton of depth on the defensive line, and this just kind of adds to the weaponry of the Cardinals depth chart. So I like that fit. On the clock now, 28th overall. I'm not going to spend too much time. A.D. Mitchell is there available for the Bills. A.D. Mitchell will be a Buffalo Bill.
Yeah, and I think Darius Robinson, back to that pick real quick, he'd be their Brandon Graham, hypothetically, in this scheme with Jonathan Gannon. I think that would make a lot of sense. A.D. Mitchell, it's a risky pick if you're the Buffalo Bills. You have some veteran wide receivers there with Curtis Samuel coming in, and you have Khalil Shakir had a nice year last year, Dalton Kincaid at tight end. You need a number 1. Is Adonai Mitchell ready to be a number one today? No. But if you get good Adonai Mitchell and he does develop into what he can develop into, he can be your number one. It's just the question is, can you coach that out of him?
Yeah, no, I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head here. 29 overall, Detroit Lions. Can I suggest Chop Robinson here? They signed Marcus Davenport, but they don't currently have a number 3 edge rusher. And typically speaking, Davenport would normally be a number 3. So if you had Chop Robinson opposite Aiden Hutchinson, I think that's a building block for the future. That's just my input, but I'm excited to see where you lean here.
Yeah, I think knowing that we only selected 2 corners this whole draft? I guess Cooper
3.
DeJean, technically, if you view him as a corner. I think they would go defensive back with this pick,
Sure.
to be honest. I think a number of guys could be in play here. I think that Nate Wiggins makes a lot of sense given the speed that he has. I think Kool-Aid McKinstry has like the toughness factor that Dan Campbell would look for. I think TJ Tampa also kind of has that toughness factor as well. Mike Sanders still has that toughness factor. I don't know if they would go for a speed corner. So Nate Wiggins may be like the best prospect on the board. I just don't think he fits like the Lions personality. But then again, you do have Carlton Davis, who doesn't have elite speed and is more of your toughness guy who can tackle. So, you know what? I'm going to give them Nate Wiggins. I'm going to give him a guy that can match up with the speed of the NFC North. You have, of course, Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison in Minnesota. You have Jaden Reed, who you got to match up with now in Green Bay, and Christian Watson. There's a lot of speed in that division. Chicago, of course, has DJ Moore. Maybe they'll add another guy at that point. So give me a speed corner there with Nate Wiggins.
Yeah, I like that fit as well. I think at the end of the day, it's going to come down to cornerback versus edge for them. And based off the betting market does agree with the Detroit Lions plus 135 for a corner, plus 200 for a defensive lineman or an edge. And sneaky here, offensive line plus 270. I don't see that happening, but it's pretty interesting that offensive line is their number 3 need according to the betting odds here. But we're on the clock here with the Baltimore Ravens. Ideally, I think they would be willing to take a tackle. The only issue is that we did see kind of a tackle run. At that point, you could look, okay, maybe they go with another defensive lineman. We know what they value here. Obviously, I believe who they just leave. They just lost somebody in free agency, I believe, right?
No, they tagged and paid Madubuike, so he's back for sure. They just lost Jadeveon Clowney. That's who they lost.
Oh, right. That's who they lost. Correct. And I mean, with that being said, you lose Jadeveon Clowney here. Obviously, you have Odafe Owe. Obviously, you have David Ojabo potentially coming back from that Achilles, but still projection there. And knowing how much they value the trenches, I can see Chop Robinson fitting in pretty nicely here. So if you're a Ravens fan, comment down below if you would have gone with an edge in this instance. I think offensive line edge or even a receiver would be in play, but I do lean the fact that Chop Robinson is currently minus 650 to be a round 1 player. So I kind of lean that as my tiebreaker.
Yeah, I think Robinson makes sense. I think they could go a little off the board with like an interior offensive lineman, like a Zach Frazier. They lost a lot of pieces on their offensive line, like you said. I already talked about it too with like Jordan Morgan types and Kingsley Suamataia and who was the other guy? Patrick Paul. Like they're getting first round buzz. So it's possible that they are the team that makes the move there at offensive line. Like I remember a couple years ago when the Falcons took Caleb McGarry, like nobody was expecting him to go in the first round and they were picking at the end of the first round there. So I could see the Ravens being the team that pulls the trigger on like Kingsley Suamataia or Patrick Paul or something like that. So I'm on the board here with the San Francisco 49ers, and they could use some corner help. They could use some offensive line help as well. It seems like literally every team in the league could use offensive line help this year in the draft. Yeah. I'm going to give them Jordan Morgan. They've been kind of connected to Jordan Morgan for a while now. So I'm going to roll with him. I think outside of Trent Williams, and Trent Williams like 36 years old, everybody on your offensive line is like a below average player. Pretty much. It's just that you have Kyle Shanahan and he can cover up the scheme with how good you guys run the ball, but pass protection can be an issue for the 49ers, especially when it counts in the playoffs. Brock Purdy, he's a good scrambler, but he also needs protection in front of him. So I like Jordan Morgan there going to the 49ers.
Yep, I think that's a good fit. Now, to wrap it off with the Kansas City Chiefs, a lot of the dynasty managers here are going to want the wide receiver, and we could take a look at the available wide receivers that I think could fall into round 1. So in terms of round 1 buzz, Ladd McConkey would be the main name. Maybe teams still really like Keon Coleman. Obviously, Ricky Pearsall, Jalen Polk getting some recent buzz. I view those guys as more so second rounders according to what the NFL circles are going to view them as. So I actually don't think the Chiefs would take a receiver in this spot. I think it would come down to an offensive lineman or it would come down to a corner. And if we check the offensive line board at tackle, they did recently re-sign Donovan Smith, but aside from that, Jawan Taylor, not the most consistent fixture. Maybe they want to upgrade at that spot. Who knows? I'm going to lean defense here. And although the odds are very nice on this at cornerback plus 600, plus 550, my correction, plus 550 for a cornerback. I just think there's a glaring player that shouldn't make it out of round one. And if we go to the cornerback position so you guys can see who I'm talking about, we got Kool-Aid McKinstry of Alabama. And I get it. People might be worried, oh, does he have the long speed, this and that? I understand. But every time I watch Kool-Aid McKinstry match against this wide receiver when I was doing study for Dynasty film sessions, him and Terrion Arnold were the two best cornerbacks in terms of a tandem that I saw in college football this year. I saw it when I was watching those guys play. I saw it when I watched Michigan go up against Alabama in the college football playoff semifinal. And now there's a glaring need for them, obviously, with the recent trade of LJ Snead to the Tennessee Titans. So you have Trent McDuffie. He's got inside-out versatility. You add Kool-Aid McKinstry here, who can play your future outside role next to him. I think that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, there's a couple guys that are heavily favored to go in the first round that don't find their way into this mock before I hit the select button on Kool-Aid McKinstry. Michael Penix is expected minus 330 to go in the first round. To be honest, I don't buy it, man. I don't buy it. I don't think he's going to go in the first round. I think that he's going to slide to day two. So if you have the over 32.5 Michael Penix bet, which I do, I personally think he'll go in day two, given the injury concerns. Jerzon Newton is a minus 280 to go in the first round. Did we sneak him in here or no? He's still on the board, so we didn't actually get him in here. Also, too, who's the other guy? Ladd McConkey is minus 125 to go in the first round as well. We didn't get him into this mock draft. Again, there's going to be guys left out. For me, Kool-Aid McKinstry does make sense, though, to the Kansas City Chiefs. So you lose LJ Snead, you need some corner help. Your secondary was a big-time strength for you last year, and it really helped carry your team when your offense wasn't really performing at the highest level. So as we usually do, final mock draft, you guys can see it there. Danny, what is your favorite pick? Actually, I'll give you my favorite pick in case you didn't think this question through. So my favorite pick of this mock draft is definitely the Bengals going up and getting Taliese Fuaga, because they have long needed a blue chip offensive tackle in Cincinnati to protect Joe Burrow. And I love the idea of getting aggressive there. And honorable mention, obviously, to me force feeding Xavier Worthy to Los Angeles Rams fans, because I actually don't think that the Rams would do that. I do think it makes sense. And I think McVay, it all lines up that he would take maybe an offensive player, an offensive skill player, but I think they'd have a hard time passing on some of those edge rushers and Fautanu.
For sure. My favorite pick, the Broncos, you're 12th overall. You're trading down. You're still getting a player like Brian Thomas Jr. Hypothetically, in this area, maybe they trade up to the start of the second round. Or, I mean, we didn't project it at the back of the first, but I can see the Broncos maybe getting aggressive with the picks that they acquired to also get another first round pick, whether that's at 28, 29, 30 area, to go and get their guy in Bo Nix. Because I do feel like if you can get and walk out of this draft with Brian Thomas Jr. and Bo Nix, if you're the Broncos, you're feeling incredible.
Yeah, and I'll give you a quick keep trade cut, because this is a fantasy channel, on Xavier Worthy, 19th overall to the Los Angeles Rams, Brian Thomas Jr., 18th overall to the Denver Broncos, and Adonai Mitchell, 28th overall to the Bills. Which one are you taking in a dynasty rookie draft if you're on the clock?
I mean, I'm just going with my rankings at this point. I currently have Brian Thomas as the highest of that group, so he would be my keep. AD Mitchell going to the Bills. Him and Worthy are relatively close at 6 and 7, but I do have AD higher, and I do prefer the Bills landing spot, so he would be my trade. And of course, not to mention the market would also value him, I think, the highest based off the Buffalo Bills, so I think you can get the most out of a trade. And then obviously at that point, the cut would be Xavier Worthy, though I don't want to cut any of these guys.
Yeah, no, I think I'd feel pretty happy if I had 109s through 111s in rookie drafts, given the landing spot of McCarthy and given all the landing spots of those wide receivers. So again, appreciate you guys for sticking around to the end. We are a fantasy channel if you guys are just watching NFL draft content, because today is the NFL draft and you do play Dynasty Fantasy Football. Hit the subscribe button down below, leave a like, comment down below your favorite pick. Call me an idiot for giving Xavier Worthy to the Rams. If you're a Rams fan, I'm sure you're not going to like that, but I can promise you I'm really high on Xavier Worthy. I don't think they're stupid for making that pick. I think he belongs to go this high. So appreciate you guys for sticking around to the end. Check out the site, link down below in the description. Check out Underdog Fantasy 2. Best Ball Mania 5 is going to be opening up very, very soon after the NFL draft. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.